All right, let's get rocking and rolling. I have a ton to go through today in today's training. And so a lot of it is be familiar to you if you've been in government contracting, but it's a good reminder to look at. But the other thing is, if you're new, then you want to begin to understand the language. I teach this all the time. If you want to have more success with federal buyers, understand the language they speak in. And one thing for sure is that we're just acronym crazy in the federal market. Some acronyms are just there to make life difficult, right? We just want to make it hard, so we'll give another acronym. But others are vital for you to know and to have success in the federal market, because when you know them, then you begin to understand how they fit into your sales lifecycle, et cetera. And so government contractors, you, me, and others, we need to learn the language of the federal buyers if we expect to win more contracts. And one piece of advice I want to give you is make sure you're asking when you don't know. Don't just sit in a meeting and let people drop acronyms or mention other things. And you're like, what is that? I did this when I was a small business owner where I would sit in meetings, especially with a large or something, and they dropped the name of a contract vehicle or something, and I didn't know what it was. And I just hesitated. I'm like, oh, I'll try to figure it out later. But just ask, because if you don't know, other people don't know, and nobody should be talking in acronyms without first explaining what the acronym is. That's just kind of courtesy, right? I think it's good grammar too. All right, so let's, speaking of an acronym, let's get talking on the top acronyms in the federal market. This is my opinion of the top ones I want government contractors to pay attention to, and you need to learn them PDQ pretty darn quick. Okay, so I'm going to cover down in the topic 10 acronyms every GovCon must know. And I'll just tell you, I couldn't keep it to 10. And so instead, what I did is almost 10 groupings. But there's actually 43 acronyms I'm going to share with you. But many of them are related to each other. And so I'll go through them really fast. It's kind of the same thing, just mentioned different ways. But each one of these are ones that I want you to understand. And I tried to leave out ones that I don't hear often enough that it matters. There are thousands, right? And so these are just the ones I really feel like should be part of the conversation people should be paying attention to. So I'm going to cover down on acronyms that relate to, well, you can see them here, but for the people on the podcast, right? Numbers that we hear different times, rules that we hear about, contract vehicles, pricing acronyms, acronyms related to the requirement of the scope. There's acronyms we use when we're talking about people. You're like, what is that? What is that? Notice types, like when you think about SAM, et cetera, that are out there. And finally, I want to wrap up with tools. In fact, one of the tools is the whole reason I'm doing this training today, because I heard somebody who has a lot of experience say, oh, I hadn't heard that term before. I'm like, well, that's kind of a common term. If you haven't heard that, then we need to be making sure we're just reminding ourselves what's out there. If you don't know who I am, my name is Neil McDonnell. I am the president of the GovCon Chamber of Commerce, and I want to welcome you to my federal sales training, where I provide tips for success in the federal market. I spent 20 years in the federal market as a small business owner, and since 2018, I've been teaching people like you that government contracting is not a secret, it's just a process. When we follow a process A to Z, we're gonna have repeatable, predictable results. And that's what I want for you, and that's why I do this training day after day. If you haven't done so already, make sure you subscribe to my Government Contracting Success newsletter. It's the largest government contracting newsletter out there, and every single day we're putting out valuable tips. For example, today's article was around registering with the military health systems and Defense Health Agency, getting into their supplier portal and registering. It was a step-by-step guide, 5 minutes to get in there and be visible to those federal buyers. So make sure you subscribe to the newsletter and not miss anything else. Also, I wanted to thank, we had about 100 people, I think, register for today's training. I appreciate that. Make sure you register so that LinkedIn can give you a reminder that the event's happening. But also LinkedIn says, hey, 100 people or 200 people registered for this. It must be valuable enough for us to push out. All right, I'm going to try to move really fast because I got 23 minutes and 43 acronyms to do. So the first thing I want to start with was top number acronyms. In this one, the very first one, I'm so glad I did it this way. It was just coincidence, but it is the most important acronym that I would like to talk to people about. EINs, these are your IRS tax number, tax ID number. This number is like a social security number for your company. Stop putting it out there on your marketing assets. It is a sensitive piece of information that no one should have but your company leadership, et cetera, right? Your finance people. That number no one should have. And that leads to the second number, which is DUNS, which has been replaced by the UEI. And I have no idea what DUNS stands for, and UEI stands for Unique Entity ID. Basically, it doesn't matter. We don't say the whole name. We say the acronym. So your UEI is this unique identifier, and the DUNS, these are put in place to mask that first number, that EIN. We don't want your social security number out there. We want you to be able to use this unique identifier. And so throughout the government, they use that number in a lot of different places. Well, you'll see that. The CAGE code, this fourth one, again, no idea what it stands for, and I don't care because none of us ever say the words. We say CAGE code, right? What's your CAGE code? What's your CAGE number? And so that CAGE, though, is a unique identifier for the DoD. I have no idea why they have double numbers. I wish they would get rid of it because you have a unique entity identifier, number 3, that should cover down on everything. But it's used, these two numbers are used everywhere. Those are the ones when somebody says, tell me about your company, that's what we want more than your company name. Your company name can be confusing. Your CAGE code and your UEI are never confusing. Number 5 is the NAICS code. Number 5 and 6 are about what you sell. So number 5 is the NAICS code, and it identifies what you sell, and it's more of a broad industry, even outside the government, type of code about what you sell. And you can watch a whole training I've done on that. But it's also used for size determination by the Small Business Administration. Based on your NAICS code and the amount of revenue you earned last year, for example, they will determine whether you're a small or large business. And so that NAICS code is a really important one, used multiple ways. It's pronounced NAICS, no other way, NAICS code, like snakes. And then the PCS is a little different. That's more unique to the federal government. And so it identifies also what you sell, but it's used within the federal government. And a lot of people are starting to trend into that area as well. So make sure you understand what you sell in relation to the NAICS code and the PCS code. All right, so the second one are the top rules acronyms. And again, these are in no particular order for the left-hand menu as you come down, but you have probably heard of the FAR, the Federal Acquisition Regulation. So people drop the FAR all the time. Don't worry about knowing the whole thing. Contracting officers don't even know the whole thing. You just need to know the parts that apply to you when you're going forward. But that's the FAR. And then you might hear these other terms like DFAR, or I don't know how to say number 9, VAR or something like that. DEER and GSAR and HSAR. These are, so the FAR is the main set of regulations, rules, et cetera, that guide the acquisition lifecycle or the acquisition in the federal government. These other ones add on to it, unique to each one of their agencies. So there's nothing special about them, but if you're selling into the VA, browse the, well, let me use GSA. If you're selling into GSA, browse GSAR, if that's the way I say it. I don't even know how to pronounce those acronyms. I don't know all of the pronunciations on there, but it's important to kind of look in there and go, is there anything unique about them that's different? So these are the top rules acronyms. All right, so the contract vehicles, the top contract vehicle acronyms, there's a ton of them out there, and a lot more than I put in here. I just put the ones that are most commonly used that you will hear on a regular basis. So an example is number 13, IDIQ. This is indefinite delivery and indefinite quantity. Nobody but those of us who like to spell out acronyms knows, or really says indefinite delivery or indefinite quantity. We just say IDIQ. And an IDIQ just means the government is going to award a contract vehicle. And again, this is not training on each one of them. This is training on acronyms. But they're going to order a contract vehicle and then have task orders come out of it. GWACs is something similar. And GWACs sit in that same range as well as, like, you think about an IDIQ. The one I know top of my head that sits pretty strong is STARS 3. It's an IT contract vehicle. It's an IDIQ and it's a GWAC, meaning it can be used across the government. Not all IDIQs are GWACs, and not all, and I'm not even sure if all GWACs are IDIQs. Maybe some of my experts could put that into the bottom, but people talk that way about IDIQ and GWACs. Those are the top 2 you hear. Then the next one you'll hear a lot about are number 15 is BPAs, these blanket purchase agreements. And the difference, and this is me just summarizing a lot of information, the difference between an IDIQ and a BPA is IDIQs could be up to these big contract awards, so 50 million, 100 million, et cetera, where BPAs, blanket purchase agreements, tend to be for smaller type repeatable purchases of similar stuff. So an example is I have a customer that has a BPA around EEO investigations, equal employment opportunity. I think that's what EEO, sorry, my mind's going blank, but EEO investigations or ASL, American Sign Language, they have another vehicle that does that. Well, these purchases are on a lower threshold and there's four similar type scope over and over again. And so that's kind of how I describe the difference between an IDIQ and a BPA. 16 and 17 are just ways of saying there's more than one winner. So 16 is GSA Mass, and that's General Service Administration, which is an agency, but Mass, multiple award schedule. And that just means they awarded the GSA schedule for like cybersecurity or administrative support. They have a lot of them. I think it's like 334 different schedules. And they're now called Mass, so multiple award schedule, where you have many different companies winning that same schedule. Basically, you just think of it like a price sheet, right? GSA negotiates with us to sit there and get our labor categories for a particular set of services or people, basically. And a MAC is just that term. You might hear people talking about a MAC. It just means multiple award contract. A contract can be awarded single award or multiple award, right? And so sometimes we throw MAC out there like it means something, but 16 is a MAC. It's a multiple award contract. It just happens to be that contract is the schedule. I don't want to get into the semantics of it. The idea, though, is if you hear somebody say MAC, you're going to understand that's a multiple award contract. And often I see that around construction. Okay, just cruising fast through a lot of these. Don't worry, by the way, the replay's there. You can come back, you can take screenshots, etc. I will not send slides, but you can come back and take screenshots. So here's my top pricing acronyms. And these are ones related to when you're trying to look at a contract, decide whether you're going to bid on it, how you're going to price it. LPTA is number 18. So lowest price technically acceptable. That literally means what it's saying. We need you to be able to do SharePoint work. Okay, we can do it. Good, you're technically acceptable. Now we're going to accept the lowest price. So they measure everybody first on technically acceptable, and then they say, well, who's got the lowest price of these technical acceptable? That is one of the worst things you ever hear. And from my perspective, you run fast if you see LPTA because it's not fair. I listened to this former general who was in acquisition talking about why are we punishing industry for making a profit if they can help us on our mission. Hopefully the government will get to that level. Number 19, FFP, firm fixed price. You won't hear us say FFP much. Ironically, we say firm fixed price when we're talking about this, but you'll see it in opportunities that are on SAM or contract vehicles, et cetera. Firm fixed price just means the government has a set of requirements. I come in and say, hey, I'll do it for $5 million over 5 years, $1 million a year. You pay me this much every month. Firm fixed price. The number 20, the one I put in here is T&M. We say T&M a lot. So time and material basically just means I'm going to charge you hourly rate. So if I've got a person and I'm billing you at $50 an hour and they're working 40 hours a week, then that's what I'm going to be billing you on a regular basis. And then material is whatever goes with that that's negotiated in the contract. But time and material, what's the time it takes you to do the work and the material cost in there. Number 21, IGCE. This is a fun one that you sometimes see. And it's one that I really want you to pay attention to. I wasn't trying to bring some weird one in. This one is a very important one to me because when you look at the acquisition life cycle of a federal buyer and they have a requirement, it goes through this roadmap, this acquisition roadmap. At one step of that roadmap that has 20 or 30 or 40 steps in there, one of them is the government does an independent government cost estimate. That means the government goes, we think it'll cost $1 bazillion. And now they're trying to match that against whatever industry is going to tell them. The reason I wanted this in here and I wanted you to know about it is you want to get in, and this is for contracts that are coming out in like 12 months, 24 months. You want to get in early and influence that whole thinking. You know, when the government's thinking about their cost estimate, go, don't forget about this, don't forget about that. An example is if they do a cost estimate on a printer and they say the printer is going to be $500, that's cool, but you're forgetting about all the ink that goes with it. So there's more that you have to pay attention to. So that's a good sales one to just pay attention to. And then number 22, sometimes you'll hear SAP or simplified acquisition. This is those ones that are in that threshold of 250,000 and below. This is a good one to pay attention to, a good acronym to pay attention to related to pricing, because if you can get in and find SAP opportunities or opportunities that are under 250, then those are all, for the most part, set aside for small businesses. Hey, let's take a quick commercial break because I'm really excited about a web-based solution we're putting together and releasing in this month. So we're in June 2024, just so you know. But here, I've been teaching for 6 years, tens of thousands of small businesses. And a lot of what I've been teaching, I haven't provided a tool. And so this is where we're going to begin to provide a tool that solves the top challenges for small business government contractors. And the three biggest problems that I see that we have in the federal space are getting in the doors to meet with those federal buyers, finding teammates who are willing to work with us, and then identifying, pursuing, and responding to opportunities that you can win. And so our tool is going to be coming out, and we're going to be rolling it out in June going forward, and it's going to cover down on these three problems in many different ways. And so if you're interested in hearing more about it, it's called GovCon in a Box. You can join our wait list at govconinAbox.com, or for the fun of it, you can go to govconrocks.com. Okay, let's pick up on the acronyms going into the second half. So top scope acronyms, these are ones related to the requirements that the government has. And so the first one I put here is SOO, Statement of Objectives. And Statement of Objectives, I don't want to go too far into this, but the idea is it's the least prescriptive to us contractors, us vendors. The government says, these are our objectives. How would you help us get to those objectives? And so that's an important thing to understand. As you're moving through each one of them, they're basically more prescriptive. So SOO is Statement of Objectives. By the way, we're not allowed to write things for the government, but writing a white paper where you talk about, hey, these are good statement of or these are good objectives for people trying to put a new floor into their building or to put in zero trust cyber architecture or something. You know, writing in the language that the government will eventually put somewhere is never a bad thing to help them just move forward. That's part of sales. Anyway, so SOO 24 is PWS is what we say, right? Performance work statement. And so here it's focused on the what. This is, so obviously there's some levels of objectives, but it's like, hey, here's what we want, our requirements, but they're not telling us how to do it. They're looking for industry to be able to say, here's our technical approach. Here's how we would approach your requirements and those objectives that are in there. Number 25, the SOW. So the SOO, the PWS, and the SOW are kind of all related, and that's statement of work, SOW. This one is the most prescriptive, for the most part, of the scope acronyms that are in there, or the documents that come out with an RFP, et cetera. And here they're really saying almost what they want and how they want it done. You'll show up at this time, you'll do this kind of work. So SOO, PWS, and SOW. All right, so now I'm getting into some fun ones that I really like. The top people acronym. And my first one's kind of favorite. We have CO or KO. And this one is just the contracting officer at an agency. But the reason it's fun for me is because in the military, the CO is the commanding officer. And so you don't sit there and say, oh, this is CAO. That's not the CO, that's the contracting officer. Ah, you're right, it's the KO. The second one, 27, is the core. And the core can be anybody, but it's the contracting officer representative. And so they're the ones focused, if you will, is more around the requirements. They can't, they don't do any agreements with vendors and the government. They don't do any commitments, but they're there to talk about the work that needs to be done, help you with liaison between the program office and the contracting office, et cetera. But that's the core. They're guiding that project through, or that contract through from start to finish once it's done. The next one, number 28, is OSDBU. That's how we say it, OSDBU, OSDBU. It stands for the Office of Small Disadvantaged Business Utilization. Another reason it's fun is because also a person can be an OSDBU. Oh, that's the OSDBU. Their official title is Director, Office of Small Disadvantaged Business Utilization. But usually we just go, oh, there's Tom. He's the OSDBU of blah, blah, blah. In DOD, number 29, we don't call it an OSDBU for some reason, and we call it a SBPO, or Small Business Program Office. And that is the DOD one. So that's what you'll see in a lot of subordinate commands where it's a director of the SBPO. People have these different titles, but basically same responsibility. They're following up on the policies and the uses of small businesses within their agency, whether it's DOD or civilian. Number 30 and 31 are both SBA acronyms. So PCR, Procurement Center Representative. This person's a great person for you to get to know, and I've talked about them before and how you can use them in previous trainings, so go watch. But basically the Procurement Center Representative, or PCR, they're responsible for making sure all opportunities that could go small do go small. So if something's going to go full and open, for the most part, these people are signing a form saying, yeah, make it full and open. And so if you're looking for an advocate that can push something out of full open down to small and you want to do it early, not late, then you want to get to know your PCRs. These PCRs are aligned with agencies that they have responsibility for. You can find it on SBA.gov website. The BOS, or boss, is what I like to call them. I don't know if they call themselves the boss, but I like that. They're the business opportunity specialists. And so the business opportunity specialists, for the most part, their responsibility is to help 8As navigate the 9-year journey that they have. How do they come into the 8A business development program and get started strengthening their business, getting contracts, making sure that they're really getting a little bit of guidance here around developing their businesses, marketing side, the stability of the back office, et cetera. So, but the business opportunity specialist is also helpful to any small business who wants to reach out. They're in the SBA, Small Business Administration's district office. And so number 31 is boss. And going with these small business professionals we've been talking about, the last one is the Small Business Liaison Officer. We call him an SBLO. SBLO is the Small Business Liaison Officer. And that is the title, for the most part, of the small business professional at large prime contractors. They have these people in place so that they can help small businesses navigate the largest and help large internal buyers find small businesses that can support their need. So SBLOs, those are great people to connect with on LinkedIn and follow them. They share information. They share tips about how to succeed. Okay, second to last one is notice types. Inside of SAM in particular, you're going to find notice types of whatever the government is dropping. And so these top notice type acronyms, that's interesting, acronyms. The first one, number 33, is IFB. And this is invitation for bid. And for the most part, it's a sealed bid that you just send in the price. The government opens them all up and goes, hey, here's the winning bid. Pretty much eBay, if you think about it. 34 is RFI, request for information. I did not put this in as a separate notice acronym, but SSN is sources sought notice, but no one ever says SSN in the reality. We tend to just blend them together and call them an RFI. Ironically, in SAM, the notice type is officially sources sought. There's no RFI in there, but a sources sought or an RFI is market research the government is doing. So pay attention to that one. Then as you're moving forward in the acquisition life cycle, you're going to run into 35 and 36. An RFQ, request for quote, or an RFP, request for proposal. For the most part, an RFQ is a page or a couple of pages that is just, hey, here's what I'm selling and here's my price. For the proposals, you're convincing them about, here's my management, here's how we do our management, our staffing, here's how we're going to handle the technical requirements and do it. I talk about when you write a proposal, you're trying to be clear and compliant, compelling, and convincing. And so a proposal needs to have those 4 components. A quote, for the most part, needs to have a price and a product. All right, so wrapping up with this acronyms on the top tools acronyms. First one we should all know is SAM, System for Awards Management. And this is run by GSA. This tool, by the way, it's where we register, obviously, right? We register if we want to sell to the federal government. But it is also where most of the tools are being brought into. So take a minute and go over there and read some of their newsletters to see what their long-term plan is for SAM, because you want to become an expert at the tools the government is using. But this is where some of these other tools are going to be brought into. And you can do all sorts of, so SAM, you register to sell to the government. It's where you can find opportunities. It's where you can find some awarded contracts. It's where you can do reports that'll show you data on what the government's buying. So there's a lot of stuff in SAM beyond just registering. Number 38, DSBS, the Dynamic Small Business Search Tool. This is managed by SBA. This is where you're able to sit there and showcase your small business and your capabilities. It's also where the SBA, who manages most of the certifications for veteran, women-owned small business, HubZone, and 8A, and small business in general, is validating to the federal buyers in DSBS together with SAM that, yes, this small business is a small business and they are an 8A firm. So DSBS is the #1 market research tool that the federal buyer uses. Number 39 is FPDS, the Federal Procurement Data System. It's my favorite because it's the raw resources that GSA, General Services Administration, it's the raw data of all contracts and all task orders, et cetera, that have been awarded, minus a few select ones. But for the most part, if you can find it publicly, it's here in FPDS. And so it's a great resource to be learning about an agency or identifying opportunities you can go after that were awarded a couple of years ago. and are coming up again. But FPDS is a tool that is a must use and must learn. Every single week you should be back in FPDS, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever it is. USA spending, it's not an acronym so much, but I threw it in there because it is basically the pretty side of FPDS. It is a much more friendly GUI. It has all the FPDS data brought in to display. It also has grants, loans, and other things that are added in from other tools that I'm not talking about today. But USA spending is actually where I go on a regular basis when I'm teaching anything about what the government buys, or I'm trying to look at it in a way that's dashboard friendly, business intelligence looking. Number 41 is eBuy, and really this could be flipped to say it's GSA. So eBuy is just electronic buy, right? But GSA, General Services Administration. But eBuy is, remember I talked about the contract vehicles and I said GSA mass, and there's 300 of them. Well, in here are where all these opportunities are dropping that you might not see in SAM. And so understanding eBuy allows you to understand where opportunities might be dropping, but it also allows you to see which other vendors might have those contract vehicles that you can build relationships with. And number 42, which is the whole reason I actually thought about doing this training today, was 𝗲PARS. A lot of people don't understand that 𝗲PARS, the Contractor Performance Assessment Reporting System, which none of us ever say, we always just say 𝗲PARS, but 𝗲PARS is Yelp for the government contracting world. This is where the government ranks our performance. Yelp is where I rank a restaurant or a plumber's performance, right? And so 𝗲PARS, just think of that way. And you always want to make sure you have good Yelp or good 𝗲PARS ratings out there. And when you know the acronym, you can begin to learn about that tool, and you can begin to understand that that tool is a 12-month window to get a good rating and not a one-day rating. Okay, so it's blew through, I guess it's 42, not 43 acronyms. But here's all I want you to remember from today's training. You can go back and watch the replay, take screenshots. But the most important thing I want you to remember is that when you don't know an acronym, ask somebody to explain it. I'm an expert, and there's a ton I don't know, right? Just because you're an expert doesn't mean you know everything. It's just you've got a good body of knowledge that you're able to move forward. And so there's things you don't know. When you ask, you break down any barriers between you and the other party, and you're also informing yourself and the people you talk to later. So ask when you don't know. If you haven't subscribed to our newsletter, make sure you do that. If you value today's training, throw thanks into the chat. Let us know that you like this kind of material. I will see you in the next training.